So the first question is, why would you use a mortgage broker versus going straight to the lender? Because the mortgage broker is like a middleman, you're having to pay. And I'll tell you, and that's an excellent question. Get that a lot. And I've actually listened to some real estate agents tell their buyers, their buyer clients, or at least recommend to them that they should go straight to a lender. I mean, why you want to pay a mortgage broker a commission, basically, is what you're paying them, when you could go straight to the lender and get the loan yourself. And I got to well, I'm going to start with my first response is, if that makes sense, then why would anybody hire a real estate agent to sell their house when you could just do it yourself? Pay no commission. I think that the reason's obvious, because most people do not know how to sell a house. They don't know what's required. And I don't know where everybody is that, in terms of where you are in the training or class right now, but hopefully you've already figured out there's a lot of disclosures. There's some written disclosures, a lot of things that has to take place when you go to sell real estate. And just because you don't have a real estate agent does not exempt you from knowing what the requirements are. So really, just to answer your question, and again, this is my opinion, and I'm sure other people have different opinions, and that's fine. But I think you need to know something. When I say you, when you become a real estate agent, you need to know, and when I say know, I mean personally, you need to know a lender or mortgage broker or both, quite frankly. And when I say know them, not just know of somebody, I mean, you need to know them. Because I'm telling you, when it comes to financing, it is so easy to be taken advantage of. There's just now look, don't misunderstand. There are many, many good lenders, loan officers. So I'm not trying to speak bad about the occupation as a whole. But like any occupation, you got some in there that can hurt you. I'm just be straightforward. They can hurt you. So if you don't know a lender, now if you know the lender, and I mean, and they're not going to take advantage of it, because it's easy to do in finance. I promise you it is. If you know a lender, then go straight to the lender. But if you don't, then you might want to use a mortgage broker, because they know how the financing works. You don't. When I say you, the buyer typically does not understand how financing works, how all the different loans work. So typically, yeah, you're having to pay a mortgage broker to help you get the right loan, but the money they can save you by getting you in the right loan is they're going to save you a whole lot more money than what you'll ever pay them to help you get the loan, if that makes sense. Is that
okay?
Obviously, you can do it either way and go straight to the lender, or you use a mortgage broker. But if you don't know that lender, and I hate here when buyers are using long distance lenders, online lenders. I mean, these are people obviously that don't know them. They've never heard of them, have never dealt with them before. And to me, there's just too much money at stake to be dealing with somebody with this amount of money, and you don't know that person. It may sound like you're getting a good loan, but if you really knew what you were getting, you could be getting hurt pretty bad. So
I'm a real estate agent. The company that I work for, like you were saying, because I don't personally know a lender, and just say my client doesn't personally know a lender. So I do ask my company, I use, who their lender is. Would that be okay? Would you think that's safe?
No, yeah, I think that's fine. Just make sure you disclose that, especially if there's any kind of business dealings where if the company's worked out some kind of deal where they're getting a cut from the loan and stuff like that, that's something you've got to make sure you disclose it. You've got to let the buyer know that this is, an in-house lender. They do a great job, but just so you know, we do have a business deal with them if you do. So that's something you want to check into. And you got to let them know that if you are, then you're getting, not only is the company making money, obviously on helping them buy the house, they're also making money on that loan as well. And there's nothing wrong with it. It just has to be disclosed.
Okay.
Okay. Good questions.
Can you explain encumbrances versus appurtenances?
Encumbrances versus what again?
Appurtenances.
Appurtenances, yeah. An encumbrance is anything that would make or render your property unmarketable. And when I say unmarketable, meaning that means you can't sell it, you can't give it away, you can't do anything with it. You cannot convey it to someone else. That's what an encumbrance is. Now, there's many different types of encumbrances, but probably one of the bigger, more common would be like liens, mortgage liens, tax liens, could be a judgment of some sort. But if any of those liens have been filed against the house, then that becomes an encumbrance, which means you cannot sell or convey the property to somebody else without paying off whatever you owe because of that lien. Okay. So that's an encumbrance. Does that make sense? You okay with that one?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Now, an appurtenance is, well, the definition, it's a right that exists with the land. It stays with the land. And meaning if I have an appurtenance of some sort, and we'll talk about different ones here in a minute, but if I have an appurtenance on the property that I own now, if I should sell my house in the future, whatever that right is, that appurtenance would convey to the next owner. Okay. So that's what an appurtenance means. And in fact, I'll put it in some different words for you. An appurtenance, again, it's a right, but that right is written in the deed. Okay. It's in the deed for the property and it stays in the deed. It does not come out. So that's why I say, so if someone buys this property and there's an appurtenance in the deed, that appurtenance conveys to that new buyer. And if they sell it, it converts over to, or reverts over to the next buyer. Probably the most common, in fact, the only really appurtenant you need to be concerned about as far as real estate testing goes would be an easement appurtenant. You know what an easement is? Have you, I don't know where you are in the class, but have y'all talked about easements in your class yet?
Yes, I know what an easement is. And I had it listed as an encumbrance though.
Well, it can be, and that's why.
Okay.
Some of these easements could, not all, but some easements can render the property unmarketable, which makes it an encumbrance. That's what they're talking about there. Now look, not all easements would be considered an encumbrance, but some are. So that's why an easement does fall under encumbrances. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
It just depends on the easement and what the requirements are, but it could render a property unmarketable. So that would also make it an encumbrance. Very good. Any more?
Can you explain C corps and S corps, or do we not need that for the test?
Well, I don't think you need to get into the details. Okay. You know, in the literature, you know, we provide a little detail there, but the main thing you need to really understand when you start practicing real estate, according to licensed law, they will allow real estate agents to create a business entity to practice real estate out of. Now, what kind of business entity, that would be totally up to you. You could do an S corporation, a C corporation, an LLC, whichever one you want. Now, from a day-to-day or practical standpoint, I recommend you talk to an accountant. And actually, I would suggest you talk to a tax attorney. Because depending on what you plan to do with that entity, in this case, practice real estate, there might be one entity in particular that would work better for you than another type of business entity. Okay. I will tell you, probably the most common is the LLC, but a lot of people have S corporations. And I'll tell you, I've got 3 S corporations that I work out of. But the reason you're allowed to have the business entity is for 2 reasons. One, for tax purposes. There could be some tax advantages by operating under a business entity. Mainly because when you get a business entity, the state will assign a tax ID number. And when you go to file your income taxes at the end of the year, if you file those taxes under your tax ID number versus, now obviously if you don't have a business entity, you don't have a tax ID number, then you have to file it under your social security number. And I will tell you, what you pay or owe in taxes could be significantly different depending on how you file. So I will tell you, most real estate, especially if they're doing much selling at all, they're going to have a business entity. But the other reason you're allowed to have it is for liability purposes. There can be some liability protections working under a business entity versus just working under your own personal name and social security number. So that's really the main thing you need to understand is that you are allowed to have a business entity to practice real estate out of. In the material, we just give you some, different types of entities that are available there. But on the exam, they're not going to ask you specifics about the different types of entities because, one, you're not an accountant, and you're not a tax attorney, right?
Yeah.
Just got to know that you can do it. That's the main thing.
Okay, I got you.
Okay, very good. Next.
Hi,
It's
this is
for-
JJ.
All right, JJ, what you got?
I have a question concerning a relationship with the broker and the licensee.
Okay.
So, getting ready to take my test soon and just been doing some various internet sample tests and have come across broker questions that we have not gone through in class. But one was, how often would the licensee renew their contract with the broker? So the correct answer was something like every year or no greater than 15 months. My question is, are there going to be questions of that sort that we should just sort of best guess because we did not have that in our material?
I have not, I've never heard that before.
Okay.
In fact, I will tell you, I've never renewed my employment with the broker that I was with.
Okay.
Once you sign on, I mean, you're on, you're hired. So
Okay.
to say you have to renew it every year, I don't know where that comes from.
Okay.
I've never heard anybody tell me that be on the test. Never on the test I've ever taken. So
Okay.
I'm not sure why. I'm not sure about that one.
Okay.
Because something about it doesn't sound right. Because once they hire, it's like any other job.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're hired until you're fired, right? You don't have to renew there's nothing to renew.
Okay.
So
All right.
I don't really understand that one.
Okay. So if the question sort of seemed unusual and not things that we've covered, maybe just sort of best guess them if they show up on the test.
Well, I don't know why they would show up on your test.
Okay.
Now, one of the, because like I said, and I've been doing this teaching for over 20 years now. And typically I have, students throughout the year, they'll come back and tell me about certain questions, especially if it was a question they felt like was not addressed in the material or we didn't talk about.
Okay.
They'll come back, but that's the first time I've ever heard that one.
Okay.
Never heard that before.
Another question that had to do with broker was you have to report amounts of cash over a certain amount. Well, if you've previously worked anything financial, $10,000 or more you have to report for IRS purposes. But I don't recall that information in our materials either. So it just seemed unusual.
That is not, now what you may, and this is something you got to be careful of, JJ. In fact, all of you. People have these practice tests that you can get online.
Sure.
And I'm telling you, it's where they get some of these questions, it's just totally, it's got nothing to do with what we're doing.
Okay.
Because I've actually seen some of these online tests and quizzes, but I mean, most of them probably are very good. I mean, there's reviews, good practice, but some of these questions that they put in there, I don't know where they come, because they're not not in South Carolina. I can tell you that. Now, maybe there's a state where there's some state specific stuff that's not pertaining to South Carolina. That could be the case. But again, not something I'm aware of them asking.
Okay.
At all.
I will continue studying our materials.
Very good. You
Thank
do that,
you.
you should do just fine.
Okay.
In fact, let me say this too, and then I'll let y'all ask more questions. If you don't already know this, last week, I just started a brand new YouTube channel, a brand new one. And it's all about help with passing the state exam. So I've already got several things on there right now, and I'm trying to put more and more on every day. But you were asking or talking about these practice questions and stuff. I've got 2 videos right now, roughly 45 minutes apiece with practice questions.
Okay.
That's on my YouTube channel. So what I would ask you to do after we finish the session here, go on to YouTube, find that it's just the title of my channel is just Frankie Griffin. And you can probably it'll probably pull up just by typing in Frankie Griffin, but the title is Frankie Griffin, Passing the Real Estate Exam. So if you type that in the YouTube search, it should pop right up. Now I've got a couple of YouTube channels. One's just real estate in general, but you're looking for the ones that's dealing with passing the real estate exam. Because it's brand new, obviously right now what I need are subscribers. So I would beg you to go on, subscribe. Again, it's free stuff. And every day I'm trying to put some new stuff on there that'll help you when taking the exam.
Okay. I do see the page right now.
Very good. Look like Ms. Hughes got it pulled up.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope Ms. Hughes and the rest of you have already subscribed or getting ready to. Okay. I didn't mean to bore you with that. So any other questions at all?
No, that was good stuff, Frankie.
Oh yeah. And it's getting better too.
Also, the real estate exam, they're only going to ask questions that's considered in South Carolina. They're not going to be asking us questions about any other states, correct?
No.
Okay. Also, this kind of like, I was just kind of listening to somebody and they ended up getting a FHA loan. And I don't know what happened. I don't know, who didn't do their part. And they were very upset, and they come to find out they had to get a conventional loan instead and then come up with more amount of money. Why would that happen? Maybe their credit score or something?
Could be. It
Okay.
could be.
So
Again,
that's the only why they would have to switch from one loan to another?
well, when you're dealing with FHA, that when a lender makes that FHA loan, they're going to sell that loan back to Fannie Mae, the secondary market. Well, the criteria to qualify for different loans, it changes like daily. So you may have to have a certain credit score, a certain debt to income ratio to be able to qualify for this loan. It might be different ratios for a different loan. So it is possible that because of their situation, they couldn't qualify for FHA, and maybe they could qualify for conventional. But conventional, up until recently, required a little more down payment. But it's my understanding Conventional loans now will allow you to get or get the loan with just 3.5% down, just like FHA. So don't worry about don't worry about that for test purposes. I was
Right.
just making that general comment, but
Okay.
okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Any more? Are y'all looking for questions or?
Yeah, I'm looking at the easements, the different ones.
Mhm.
Do you have to know all the different ones or just what an easement is?
Well, you need to be familiar with, well, yeah, you need to know what an easement is, but you need to know the difference between easement and pertinent and easement and gross primarily. Remember, easement and pertinent, we talked about pertinent at the beginning of this little session here. It's an easement of pertinent, that means is deeded. That means there's a servient tenement and a dominant tenement.
Okay.
And it's in the deed and it's going to stay there. But if it's an easement and gross, it is not deeded. An example of an easement gross might be if I let my neighbor come, cross over my property for some reason, because we're neighbors, we're friends, whatever. So I just agree to let them walk across or drive across my property for some reason. Well, when you tell somebody they can cross over your property, you've granted them an easement, whether it be orally or in writing. You've granted them an easement. But if you did not grant it through a deed, if that right was not deeded to them, then it's an easement gross. If you put it in the deed, then that becomes an easement of pertinent. And now it stays with the land. You can't take it away. Okey-doke.
A little tricky problems with advertising, like the trigger terms
Yeah.
and like the teams that I guess the advertising you can't put anywhere. Can you just go over that a little bit with that team thing, advertisement?
Sure. The only thing that you need to be concerned about or worried about there is what the law requires from lenders, because we're talking about when lenders are advertising, we got this great loan and we can get you the best deal and so forth. What the law basically is telling the lenders, you can't just put what sounds good in the ad and then leave out the parts that are not so good. You either tell it all or you tell none of it. And so when they talk about trigger terms, they're saying if you happen to mention a down payment, or for example, we've got a loan with a very low down payment. Well, that sounds good. Okay, well, what's a very low down payment? Because you can't just put a low down payment, because that's, according to the law, is a trigger term, which means now you got to tell me, well, how much is the down payment, or what percentage of the loan will be required as the down payment. So really, the only thing we really want you to understand there is lenders can't just say or put things in their advertising that sound good, like low down payment, and then not tell you what that low down payment will be. They got to tell you, they got to give you the whole story, not just part of it. That's all that's the main thing you need to understand about trigger terms. It just means it requires additional information. If you use certain trigger terms, there's more information you got to provide.
Okay.
Y'all got some good questions tonight. I'm impressed.
Can you explain rollback taxes?
I can. Rollback taxes is dealing with agricultural property, or property that's been zoned to be used agricultural. And the reason, well, first of all, why would someone ask the assessor to zone their property agricultural? What and again, we're talking about in South Carolina right now, what I'm about to take could vary in different states. But the assessment rate in South Carolina for owner occupied property is 4%, right? Hopefully we remember that. Well, the way the law reads, you do pay 4% if it's owner occupied for up to 5 acres of land. Well, if you own more than 5 acres, anything over 5 acres will be assessed at 6%, which I will tell you is a big difference when you start looking at the money here, or the taxes rather. So people that own more than 5 acres, they will typically go in and request the assessor to rezone it as agricultural in the part that's more than 5 acres. Because if it's zoned agricultural, the county does not consider that to be highest and best use for the land. So therefore, they will only require you to pay the 4% rate versus the 6% rate. So they'll have it converted agricultural to save tax dollars here. Where the rollback taxes come in, let's say I had 20 acres. I've got 20 acres and I had it zoned as agricultural. Now, let me say too, you can't just call them and tell them you want to rezone something agricultural. Obviously, for it to be agricultural, you have to use the land for agricultural purposes, meaning you have to be growing something, whether it be farm, corn, cotton, farm stuff, or you could grow timber. That's considered agricultural, like pine tree, marketable timber. But you got to be growing something. But again, let's say I've got 20 acres and I go to sell my property. Well, who asked me? Was this Brianna? Who asked me that question?
Yes, that was me, Brianna.
Okay. Well, let's say you, Brianna, decide to buy the property from me. Well, obviously, I've got 20 acres, but I'm using it all as agricultural property. I mean, I'm growing stuff, right? Well, if you buy the property and then go in and do something else with the property, in other words, you decide you're not going to grow stuff. You're not going to be a farmer or whatever. You're not going to have timber. You're going to, and let's say you decide to allow your son to build a house back on the backside of it or something, just give him a piece of land or whatever. Well, anytime you change that use, once they agree to go agricultural and you use it for anything else, now the county is going to assess you these rollback taxes. You're going to have to pay rollback taxes now. And the question, how much will that rollback tax be? Well, the way they'll figure it out, they're going to go back a period of 5 years and figure out what was the difference in taxes at the 4% rate versus what it would have been at the 6% rate over the last 5 years. And that's what you're going to owe in rollback taxes. So rollback taxes apply when someone owns agricultural property and then decides to use it for any other purpose. You're now going to have to pay these rollback taxes. Did that help?
Yes, that was helpful. I was just taking notes. Thank you.
Very good.
And while you were speaking of the 4 and 6%, I just want to be clear. South Carolina does not have usury laws. So if it's verbally, can you explain which one you are?
The usury laws apply to interest rates on when you're borrowing money. What Brianna was talking about, what the 4 and 6% was the assessment rate for tax purposes, for property taxes.
Right. But I wanted to know, so if it's not in writing, they can charge whatever. But if it's not, can you tell me which one has to be in writing to get the interest and which one not?
South Carolina does not have usury laws. So that's important to know that. And also, just in case you're not sure, make sure you know what usury means, because they could ask you that on the exam. Usury just means charging excessively high amounts of interest when you're loaning money. That's usury. Well, some states have passed usury laws, which in essence cap or they have a maximum amount of interest that can be charged on any loan in that state. Well, South Carolina is not one of those states. We do not have usury laws. So in essence, the lender can charge any amount of interest they want to charge, as long as obviously whoever the borrower is, as long as they agree to it. The question I think you're asking is this: as long as the loan is in writing, who the lender and the borrower agree in writing to any amount of interest rate, there is no maximum interest. But if the loan is not in writing, they did not agree to it in writing, then the law does say in South Carolina, the maximum interest you can charge is 6% if it's not in writing. As long as you get in writing, it can be as much as you want to charge or as much as the borrower is willing to pay.
But if it's not in writing, only 6%.
That's it.
Thank
you. Yep.
I have a deed question.
Okay.
If you're selling your property on today, Monday, and you've agreed to it, you've paid for it, you've received the funds, but the seller does not have the actual copy of the deed, but delivers it to you on Tuesday, tomorrow, is the deed received today, Monday, because I've paid for the property, it's now mine? Or is it only received after it's been delivered and accepted truly in hand?
Well, the money should not pass hands until the deed is passing hands. And this is what this now, and I'm not sure how that would happen. What you just described, I'm not sure how that would happen in South Carolina.
Okay.
Because in South Carolina, all real estate transactions must be closed by an attorney. That's not an option. Okay. So in other words, the buyer and seller can't just agree to, I'll write you a check and you give me the deed. No, there has to be an attorney. And that attorney is going to collect the money, and obviously whatever the parties agreed upon in terms of a sales price. And the attorney's not going to pay the seller for selling the land until the seller has the deed and signs the deed over to the new buyer. So all that has to happen simultaneously.
Okay. So no private sales, that is not typical. You still would need the attorney to handle the closing. So
Absolutely.
You would not be delayed on receiving a deed. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You cannot convey real estate in South Carolina without an attorney.
Awesome.
That's not every state, but it is in South Carolina.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're going to look at, now that we.
Somebody listening to me.
I was subscribing to your YouTube channel.
Well, good. Whoever that was, he sounded intelligent.
That was you.
Okay. All right. Any more? Any other questions?
For the course exam, is it going to be like a pass fail or it gives you your grade at the end?
No, you'll get a grade.
Okay. And what is the passing grade?
It's 75.
Okay. Thank you. Is that for the actual exam too?
The state exam, I want to say it's around set. It's actually like 70.2 or something like that, but it's about 70%. But remember now, you got to pass 70% both on the state portion and on the national portion. There's two different parts to it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to make sure the only way you can list anyone's property in South Carolina is you have to have the agency agreement.
No, not now, because you could, if the seller and the agent agreed to, then you as the seller, or excuse me, you as the agent could act as a transaction broker, which means you're not representing the seller. You're just basically being a facilitator. You can't represent them. You cannot provide any professional services, which I don't know why a seller would do that. But legally, you could work with the seller as a customer, which would not require an agency relationship. because you're acting as a transaction broker, and you can do that.
So you
You don't-
can,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
so you can list their house?
Well, okay, maybe I misunderstood your question. You can't list it as a transaction broker, but you can help the seller sell it. In other words, because see, if they're saying they don't want any representation, obviously, then they don't want you listing the house.
Right.
But if they want you to list it, and as when I say list it, put it in the MLS, offer it to other then yes, there would have to be an agency relationship to do that, because now you're providing a professional service.
Okay.
So I have a follow-up question on that. So a home for sale by an owner cannot be in the MLS?
No, not in our MLS. Again, maybe there might be others around the country that will allow it, but not here. You have to be a real estate agent to put anything in the MLS.
So they could post it on other sites such as Trulia or
Oh,
Zillow,
yeah.
something
yeah.
of that nature, but they
Yep.
don't have to have an agent. Okay.
They can.
Can you explain variances under zoning laws?
A variance is, if I'm buying a piece of land that's zoned to be used for a purpose that I don't want to use it for. In other words, I want to use this property, but it's currently not zoned for what I want to use it for. So therefore I couldn't use it if it's not zoned for what I want to use it for, right? So an option for me, I could go to the Planning and Zoning Commission and request a variance. By doing that, in essence, you're asking the Planning and Zoning Commission to rezone this property to whatever it is I need it to be zoned so that I can do what I want to do with it. They may grant the variance, which means they would agree to rezone it. They may not. It depends on it'll depend on your justification on whether or not they'll grant the variance or not. But I will tell you, typically, if you can prove to the Planning and Zoning Commission that what you're intending to do, if you can convince them that that would be in the best interest of the public, then more than likely they'll grant you the variance, change the zoning so that you can use it the way you want to. But the short answer is a variance is just requesting property to be rezoned. That's what you're asking for.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Good stuff. Y'all are hard at it, I'll give you that.
Question, will there be amortization schedules or tables on the test for us to calculate?
Yes.
Okay.
In fact, they'll have the same table, amortization table that's in the book that we provide. You'll see they will provide that table to you at when you go take the exam.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I just want to make sure astigmatism, we do not have to disclose that only if they ask.
Right. If it's a stigma, you're right. You only have to disclose stigmas if you're asked.
But like a meth lab, we have to because that considered environmental health issues.
Right. A meth lab's not a stigma. That's an environmental issue.
Okay.
That
Okay.
can cause serious health issues with somebody going there, breathing, inhaling. To my knowledge, I've never been in a meth lab, but apparently it doesn't smell good.
Okay, so just to make sure if we're standing there and they be like, oh, we heard that it was a sex offender down the street, and then I would say, well, the best thing for you to do is to go on the website and look and see, where they're located in your neighborhood or to this property.
Right. And
Okay.
whoever the buyer's agent is, they're required to tell the buyer. In fact, the buyer has to sign acknowledging that their agent disclosed to them that the agent will not be looking for sex offenders. Buyer, if you're concerned about a sex offender anywhere near a property you're thinking about buying, that's your responsibility to go on the sex offender registry yourself and find out. But
So Frankie,
yes.
I'm sorry. So with the sex offender, you're saying we're supposed to disclose to them that they're supposed to go on the sex offender website, but we're just letting them know, and they're signing off on that they're totally responsible, right?
Yeah, the law requires all agents, all buyer agents, to have the buyers acknowledge in writing that you told them they're responsible to go on the sex offender registry themselves, because you will not be doing it for them.
Regardless, for every property that you show as you act as a buyer's agent.
Yep. Every buyer you represent, they better. And look, I will just tell you, when they sign the buyer agency agreement hiring you to represent them, I will tell you that provision has already been put in the buyer's agreement. So that's why a lot of people don't even think about it. Because the law says the buyer has to sign something acknowledging they know they have to do it themselves. Well, there's a paragraph or provision in the buyer agency agreement that actually tells them it's their responsibility to go on the sex offender registry and look stuff up if they're concerned about it. But they do have to sign something saying they were told.
So you mentioned the meth lab. What about if the previous owners always like smoke marijuana? Is that something that you disclose or no?
No, there's no. Well, first of all, I don't even know how you would know that. I mean, I guess unless they just told you that, or they're sitting there smoking it while you live in their house. But to answer your question, no, that's not. See, a meth lab has some very dangerous chemicals.
Okay.
The marijuana does not have those chemicals like in a meth lab.
Okay.
So that would not be the same thing at all.
This is one of my last questions. If you're standing there and you got the nosy neighbors and they're like, the reason that they want to sell is because, say for an example, they're about to fall into foreclosure. So they're trying to hurry up and sell their house. And the neighbors are like, why are they willing to sell? What's the hurry? Why do they want to sell? Are you able to say why they're able to sell, or just say that they're motivated sellers? You remember that question, kind of?
Well, if they're in foreclosure, in other words, the bank has already, or the lender has already notified them of foreclosure, it's too late. You can't sell it at that point.
But my question was more geared at about the nosy neighbors. Can you disclose to them the reason that the sellers are, what's their motivation for selling? It was a question like, why can you tell them that they ready to sell?
If the seller, that would be considered confidential information,
right,
about the seller, that they're in, they can't make their payments and they're soon going to be looking for or something like that. But if the seller gives you permission or tells you that we just trying to get rid of it to avoid the foreclosure, then yeah, you can go ahead and tell them that. But
So
once it goes into foreclosure, now that must be disclosed and you cannot sell it.
Right.
So I just want to be clear there. But if the seller is thinking, you know what, I'm not able to make the payments, I know the bank's going to foreclose, and they're just trying to sell it before the bank files foreclosure, then they can do that. And if they tell you to disclose that, then you can. But if they don't, then you can't disclose it.
Okay, so only if they tell you to disclose.
So Frankie, let me make sure I got it right. So if, let's say the house has a leaky roof and the seller doesn't want to disclose it, we are showing the house, we have to tell the potential buyer, hey, this house has a leaky roof.
Yes.
Okay.
Which means you're probably going to have a pretty rough relationship with your seller from this point forward. But no, you're right. Whether they disclose it or not, you have to. Yeah, they can't tell you to keep it confidential because the law
Okay.
requires you to disclose.
Okay, got it.
Any more?
I think I'm good so far.
All right.
I have a question on the government rectangular system.
Yeah.
And is that something that there could be multiple questions in order to do calculations, or is that sort of pretty sporadic?
I mean, they could give you a legal description for the government and ask you a couple questions out of it, I guess, but I'm not sure if I'm following exactly what you're asking.
Does that seem like there would be multiples of those types of calculations?
I don't think it'd be many, no.
Okay.
I don't think it'd be more than maybe one, honestly.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Fun stuff.
So what happens if you, okay, so say like a house has the lead paint and you know how you have to provide the disclosure form for that and the lead pamphlet? What if you forget to do something like that?
Don't.
You know.
I don't think this would be on the test, but I will tell you that's a $10,000 fine if you don't get that lead paint disclosure signed, and assuming you get caught.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, that's not something you won't forget it the second time. I promise you.
And I just want to make sure when they're hiring the company, not the big person per se.
Well, the BIC is the company. As far as the law is concerned, the company is the broker in charge. You cannot differentiate between the two. They're one and the same.
Okay.
So in essence, the broker in charge is the agent. So obviously, so is the company. They're one and the same.
Okay.
We good?
I am good.
Anybody else?
Are mobile homes covered by FHA?
Some maybe. I wouldn't worry about that. That's not something I'd worry about for exam purposes, but
Okay.
just to answer your question, I'm gonna tell you, it's not easy getting any kind of loan for now. Now, if it's new, if you're buying it new, you can get a loan for it. But I'm gonna tell you, especially if you got one that's got any age to it,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
it is very difficult. I'm not gonna say there's not loans out there, but there are very few of them.
But construction loans are not covered by FHA.
They could be.
They could be. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Any more?
Just want to make sure if the buyer and seller cannot agree regarding the earnest money, the big just holds it until some type of an agreement is settled, or they just hold it.
Yep, you're exactly right. Until I get something in writing where they've agreed or a court order.
Okay.
telling me what to do, that money has to stay in the trust account.
Is there a statute of limitations on that?
Nope.
Could you actually hold that for 20 years?
Yep.
Wow.
Absolutely. Under the current laws, it could be there for a long until you retire or whatever, and then you got to turn it over to the state. But the state won't take it from you until you are retiring and tell them, hey, I'm done, I'm out of business. You want this money? And then they'll take it. But you certainly better not take it.
Okay.
And we cannot accept any gifts from anybody. I guess like if the big say it's okay or no. Because that's
can't say it's okay because the law says you can't do it. So the BIC can't say it's okay. Well, when I say you talking about from a settlement service provider, a lender, or home inspector, or something like that.
Well, no, just like from my buyer, just they just said I did a great job, and they wanted iPad or something. I cannot accept that. Correct?
Yeah. No, you can't. But they can give it to the company or the broker in charge, and then the broker in charge might give it to you or split it with you or whatever. But you're right. You cannot accept it for yourself. It has to come through the company, or you can lose your license over that if you get caught.
That's considered a kickback, correct?
Well, no, that's not a kickback. A kickback is when you're referring someone to a service provider in exchange for something else. No, you're just, what I'm hearing you say is just a gift from your client because they like you, that they appreciate what you did for them. The company can accept it, but you can't.
Okay.
I see something in my notes from a while back about mortgage interest deductions, and I don't understand it. Could you go over it?
Well, mortgage interest is a tax deduction. That's a tax deductible, excuse me, item. So in essence, if you pay $10,000 a year in interest, mortgage interest, you can deduct that from your income before your income taxes are calculated. So it's a tax deductible item. And the law allows you to deduct up to $1.1 million in mortgage interest. You got up to $1 million on acquisition debt that you may borrow. Acquisition debt is the amount of money you borrowed, whatever amount you borrowed when you bought the house, up to $1 million, the interest on that loan is tax deductible. But then if you ever get a home equity line of credit, a home equity loan, the interest on that loan is also tax deductible up to $100,000. So between the two types of loans, you could deduct up to 1.1 million.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Okay.
So say for an example, I owe $59,000 remaining on my house. It's appraised for $110,000. And I want to take out $50,000 to just do something personal. Am I able to do that, or do I have to specify that it's like home improvement or something like that?
No, you can do a home equity line of credit, which is basically what I'm hearing you say. And no, you could do that. And that's where you could deduct up to $100,000 in mortgage interest on that equity line of credit. It's just a line of credit against your house.
So that is considered two mortgages though?
Oh yeah. So that'd be two liens against your house. You'll have a mortgage lien, and then you'll have, it's at the home equity loan, which is another mortgage. So you have two mortgage liens until it's all paid off.
What's the benefit? It seems like that would put you more in debt.
Well, I agree. I'm one of these that is certainly today, you know, it took me a few years in my life to learn it, but you're never going to finance your way out of debt. That ain't going to happen. The only way you get out of debt is go to work, get you several jobs, 2, 3 jobs if you need to, and pay it off. That's the only way you're going to get out of debt. The reason people do it is because the interest on that loan is tax deductible. The problem is, in fact, and I don't want to get too far into the weeds here. Well, I won't even get into all that, but I'm not going to start preaching tonight. I don't recommend people do stuff like that, but I will just tell you, people do it. And the reason they do it is because the interest on that loan is tax deductible. In fact, a lot of times what they'll do, say they want to go buy a car, they'll take out a home equity loan enough to buy the car because now the interest on that loan is tax deductible. Where if they just got a car loan, it would not be tax deductible. Does that help any?
Yes. Just never understood why people did that. I thought it was more in the debt too.
It is. You'll never borrow your way out of debt. That ain't going to happen. Only way you get out of debt, quit borrowing, and 2, pay off what you got. That's it. That's the only way you're going to get out of debt.
So if I wanted to sell my house and I had that much equity and I'm trying to, say for an example, buy a condo, would I then put what is it called, a contingent in there stating that's what I'm trying to do? Well, I'm trying to sell one house where I'm trying to buy another one.
Well, if you're making an offer on a house and you can't close on it without selling one you already own, then yeah,
Right.
you want to put that contingency in there that you cannot close until your house sells first.
Okay.
We good?
Yes, sir. To next week.
Anybody else before we go to bed? Good questions. Good questions.
Thank you very much for doing this.
All righty. Well, then we'll be back again next week. And again, if you think of more questions, write them down and we'll talk about them then. Y'all don't forget to go and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Frankie Griffin, Passing the Real Estate Exam.
I did.
All right.
I did.
Y'all have a great week, okay?
Okay,
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Take care.